The final step for the blades is going to be to add some oil paints. I have black and burnt sienna. On one of the videos that I did a few weeks ago, I was chatting with Corey over at CP3D Printing, and he had some suggestions for getting better results on one of the projects that I was printing. So then he also sent me 3 different designs of his. The one that we're doing today is the Drax blades, but also a sword and a trident that are really cool. I'll put a link in the description to the Etsy store, of course, so that you can check out his whole library of weapons. He also has pictures of the model printed out so that you know exactly what you're gonna get. The edge is blunted, which is nice, you know, if you want to actually take these in public and not have to worry about anybody getting freaked out. I don't have any cleanup to do other than just filling in print lines. I'm gonna finish these differently from the movie. Get these gloves on so I don't get Gorilla Glue all over myself. So I have both of my dowels and both of my knives here. And I'm just gonna use Gorilla Glue because this is going to expand and fill in any little gaps in the tolerance between the hole and the dowel. There's a little bit of extra there. So that will, as it cures, expand and fill in that space and make this a really good bond. Just gonna pop that in here. This cures from the moisture, so if you just mist it with a little bit of water, that'll speed up the curing process. And it is, you can tell, starting to expand because now there's more extra around these edges. But a little bit is good because then we won't have to use like a filling putty or anything. We'll just be able to sand the glue down. So now I'm gonna just pull it apart again. I got rid of a little of the extra, but I am gonna just leave that to cure for a few minutes. It's starting to get a little white and foamy, so that's a good time to go ahead and press this together and take care of any squeeze out at that point. It doesn't have to be perfect. We'll just sand off any extra. So that sticks well enough now. I just need to prop it up just between a couple of containers here that have enough in them that they are heavy enough to hold this in place. I've already done 1 coat of primer and then sanded it. 2nd coat, trying to put it pretty thick in some of these areas where there's a little bit of unevenness that I need to smooth out. And I'm not trying to sand into these details. They're gonna be fine once they're painted. I just wanna make sure not to spray the primer so thick that it gums them up. These are looking pretty smooth now with the coats of filler primer. So I gotta grab my Dremel. First thing I wanna adjust is right here. This is right now on the same level, the handle into this crossguard piece here. There's just a little bit of ledge here so that it's defined, the handle material into this piece here. Next, I want to try sharpen the blade just slightly. Now I know I can't go too deep because this isn't solid plastic, but I think I can probably at least put a little bit of a bevel on this. I'm going to start testing it out, and if it doesn't work, I'll just stop and fill in the hole, but I want to just try. It does seem to be working. Just bevel it off slightly and then I'll be left with a raised area in the center. And I think that with the right paint application, I can give this the illusion of being more sharpened without actually having something that's sharp and no longer con safe. Let's just see what we can do with these details here, if we can make them a little more prominent. So it's a challenge to keep your hand steady enough. Going through every single line, I'm gonna end up doing more harm than good. So I'm not sure that it's worth deepening these at all. I've also sanded a little bit deeper right next to these areas here so that I'm gonna end up with a slight ledge there. Same thing along here. I also added in a trench right there so that this acts as a single piece for when I'm painting. Also the blade, I've added in those bevels. Because this has the filler primer, it's easy to see how deep you're going. An automatic guide so you don't accidentally sand all the way through into the infill. I'm gonna try this metallic gold on here for my base coat. Respirator, of course, is a must. They're dry now, but I noticed a lot of imperfections once I started putting on the metallic paint. Now metallics will bring out every little issue that you just couldn't see before you put it on there. So I think this needs some more sanding, maybe some standard primer versus the filler primer so I can wet sand that. Even my joint lines came back through. And I also got a couple of drips, probably because I was trying to cover those imperfections because I really didn't want to have to sand again. These are both now sanded. I don't think I'm going to do the gold again. I didn't really like that. Also, I don't want to wait another day for spray paint to dry. I'm thinking I'm going to just jump into painting these with acrylics. Brushing that just along this sharpened edge here. So I don't want to completely fill in some of these details. They're starting to get pretty shallow. So I've got more control with a brush than I have with the spray. I'm using gunmetal now. I decided I didn't like the gold showing through on this edge. I've already done a couple of coats of gunmetal here, but I'm also going to just overlap a little bit with the lighter silver. Still some of the gold showing through. In the end, it probably would have been a better idea to do another base coat, maybe of either black or silver. This is going to be sort of a wood look handle that I'll darken everything up later on. First of all, I've just got a light yellow. It's got a lot of white in it, and then burnt umber. We're just gonna brush this on. Now the wood grain would be going that way. Obviously you wouldn't want to have your wood grain running this way on a real handle because it would just snap. And you want to make sure you get enough of the brighter colors in there because adding washes later, it's gonna darken it down. That's looking pretty good now on the brown and yellow, so I'm gonna go ahead and introduce some of this white. Just very lightly dry brushing it over. Add in some highlights. This is all gonna need to be clear coated to lock in all the paint before we go any further. These both got sprayed with sealer, but this one I've already done the toning on the handle. We're doing light, watered down layers. Starting off, I want to use more of the red and yellow. Taking this from this kind of washed out color, make it a little more vibrant. Okay, maybe not that vibrant. And I'm not pressing as hard with the brush so that the brush strokes stay separate and don't just push all the way into the piece. I'm going to mix up a slightly darker patch here, with heavier on the blue and red. Less of the yellow, more extreme in a few places. Yeah, just like that. And also around this opening here. And I want to darken up just around the end grain here, where it would take more of the stain if this were real wood. Also doing a few touch-ups before I do the final coat of sealer. So I've got my dark silver right now, and I'm just brushing over any areas that could use a little better definition. And then I think we're going to try weathering with oil paints. These have now been sprayed with several light coats of an acrylic sealer to lock in all of those paint layers. I don't want to mess those up with the weathering. So now I have black and burnt sienna oil paint. This is one that's been fully weathered with oil paint, just taking away some of that bright redness and also filled in all these little details so that they are how they would naturally be, which is darker, weathered from like the oils on your hand. It goes on kind of thick at first, but I want to rub that into the details and then just polish away the parts that I don't need. Brings it all into the same like color range. This is good to wear gloves here because using your fingers is kind of a useful way to get the paint into all the crevices where you want it. I'm gonna go ahead and try some of this on the blade. I want to see what that looks like. I don't know if the brown is a good idea, but you can always polish off if it doesn't look good. Darken those recessed areas just a little more and polish that off. Definitely want to go light on the brown color because it starts to make it look like it's rusting or like it's more of a gold toned metal. Any extra on these handles or on the blades, just polish it down with a clean piece of the shop towel. I think those are about done. I'm going to leave them to dry now. These blades are now finished, so let's see what they're capable of. Hey-ya! Let's try something a little more tasty. I think we need one more go at that. And this strawberry is a goner. The styrofoam might be its match. So check out CP3D Printing on Etsy. Subscribe if you had fun, and I'll see you in the next video.